because of the revisions. Now, the argument showing that rate cut could possibly even have been in June, if you look at these numbers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics revised down the May report by 125,000, only 19,000 jobs created in May. The revisions down for June, 133,000 jobs, just 14,000 created in June. So President Trump already taking to Truth Social several times, in one post saying, "Too late, pal, a stubborn moron must substantially lower interest rates now."
The report comes on the day that President Trump sets new tariffs on dozens of countries, ranging from 10% to 41%. A family advocacy organization wants to expose what it calls the unspoken scandal of teenage gender manipulation surgeries and what it says is bias from the media on the topic. More from AFN's Bronson Woodruff.
California Family Council, or CFC, has been vocal in its opposition to surgeries and other procedures on minors intended to make them more like the opposite sex. These procedures have been dubbed gender-affirming care, although critics call it gender mutilation. Greg Burt, president of CFC, said his team is excited that Kaiser Permanente, a major medical institution, announced it has paused its gender-affirming surgeries on minors.
Now, these surgeries are really giving double mastectomies to young teenage girls who are distressed about their bodies, think they're the opposite sex. But the problem is we can't get the press to really report on what's happening.
He said that's a problem they've had as recently as this past weekend when Kaiser made the announcement.
I was interviewed. Throughout the interview, they simply gave the perspective from the pro-trans side, saying these are life-saving surgeries.
Burt said he looked at over 18 stories.
We call them detransitioners. Only one story highlighted the interview from someone who had their breasts removed. Lila Jane, she had her breast removed at age 13. Most of the reporters we're finding don't want to interview detransitioners. And so really this is a cover-up. They're protecting the medical industry who has harmed hundreds and hundreds of kids who've had their bodies mutilated. And sadly, the press is hiding that.
Burt has put out an editorial detailing it.
Hopefully it wakes some reporters up to the reality of the biggest medical scandal that our country has seen in decades.
I'm Bronson Woodruff.
The Texas Tribune says Kerr County officials failed to follow certain aspects of a disaster plan during the Texas floods. The 5-year-old plan required by the state detailed when additional monitoring was to take place and who was responsible for alerting the public to evacuate. The plan, which all counties must file with the Texas Division of Emergency Management, serves as a disaster playbook for local officials. Parts of the upper Midwest are reporting some of the worst air quality in the world due to smoke from ongoing Canadian wildfires. Fox's Jeff Manasso has more.
The sun here in Chicago clouded by a thick haze as Canadian wildfire smoke returns, along with unhealthy air quality alerts in effect for all of Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Michigan, along with parts of Indiana, Nebraska, and Missouri, with air quality expected to get worse across 12 upper Midwest states through mid-weekend from wildfires in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba that have burned all summer. Public health officials recommending that people with medical conditions, older adults, children, and teens avoid strenuous outdoor activities, keep time outside short, and move activities indoors until the smoke clears. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
That's all our time for now. Find more news at afn.net. I'm Robert Thornton.
Some would say truth is relative, and to the world, that's right. What the world considers to be truth fluctuates depending on the narrative they're trying to promote. Of course, we know truth is found in Scripture, and it never changes. The documentary, The God Who Speaks, proves the Bible's reliability as the source of real truth and reinforces our belief in it as our firm foundation. Watch it anytime at stream.afa.net. That's stream.afa.net.
Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mom of 4, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to Friday. Yes, it's Friday. It's Friday. We have made it through another week. I don't know about you. It's been a long week for me, traveling to the studio and back, but so good to see our friends at American Family Radio, and so good to always see you all on the air every day. And we are at another Friday. We are at Ask Dr. Nurse Mama Friday, where I answer questions that I'm getting from listeners, from my patients, from communities, and my my own family, all questions related to 52 habits for healthy families. Now, that is your weekly dose of encouragement and wisdom and real life strategies to help you build stronger, safer homes and families. And I'm so glad that you are here. If you've been following along since the beginning, you know every Friday we talk about a habit for healthy families. These are just essential building blocks. We started, those of you who listen every day, you know this by now. I hope you're adopting all of these habits. We talked about basic spiritual disciplines, prayer, memorizing scripture, going to church, playing worship music. And then we talked about just some daily rhythms that should be in your family, practicing gratitude, having a daily devotional, having a morning and evening routine, getting good sleep hygiene, having dinner together as a family, checking in with your family at least weekly. Then we talked about some communication skills. These are tough, step on your toes kind of topics. We talked about the importance of listening with your face, speaking words of affirmation over your family, apologizing sincerely, writing letters, modeling your faith, giving generously, playing together, gathering together with family. And then we started 10 weeks of tech. We talked about the ways that technology impacts our families, and I gave you 52. Of the 52 habits, I gave you 10 of those, 10 of 52. We spent talking about technology. We talked about the importance of reading out loud, watching faith-based films with your family. And by the way, last night, my producer Stephanie and I were able to go to a special preview of a movie that's coming out in October from one of our guests who was on in March. It's called Soul on Fire by John O'Leary, the story of a boy who was severely burned on 100% of his body when he was about 8 years old, and he survived. And not only that, he thrived. And it is an incredible story of overcoming odds, of faith, of resilience, of hope, and of baseball. So if you're a sports enthusiast, especially if you like the St. Louis Cardinals, this is definitely going to be something you want to put on your calendar in October. And if you want information, you can contact us and we'll tell you how you can arrange for a group to see that early if you're interested in that. But that's something that's coming out, and that was fun that we did last night. I laughed and I cried for sure. We talked also in Tech Habits about being in pictures, about unplugging when you're on vacation, having tech-free zones, tech-free times, tech tracking, having transparency in your tech use, tidying up your tech. And last week, we shifted and transitioned to start to talk about topics of safety. And we talked about staying safe while you're using technology for your family. Now, I could talk about that for every day, all year, and I still wouldn't tell you everything that you needed to know. But if you're thinking, hey, I've missed out, one of those subjects, one of those habits sounds intriguing to me, go back and listen to any corresponding Friday show, or if you want the 1-minute version, Dr. Nurse Mama Coaching Minutes, AFR.net, AFR's app. You can do any podcast app and you can find those. So we are going to transition to be talking about safety. Now, this might sound boring, but for me as a pediatric nurse practitioner and someone who's worked in pediatrics for almost 30 years, this is really important to me. Safety is so important. So we're going to be walking through some holistic ways to keep your family safe. And I'm going to answer some questions about some safety threats that are coming toward all families of all ages and stages. Last week, I talked about tech safety, but this week we're talking about sun safety. And the sun gives life, it gives energy, and it's fun. But there are some things that can come along danger with the sun that are heat related, exposure related. And so today we're talking all things sun safety. Now we're starting to wrap up the end of summer, but I live in the South and we won't be done with summer until probably about 6 weeks after I put up my Christmas tree, and that's the middle of November. And so wherever you are, these are things to be concerned about. Now, I want to start today with a heartbreaking story. I know we've covered a lot of tough things this week, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. There are so many things that are tragic in the world, but we can find hope. I did read a news story this week about a 16-year-old named Joshua Henderson, who was a high school football player in Tennessee. And he tragically recently died from complications due to a heat stroke. Now, according to his family, he collapsed during football practice on July 6th, and his mom got a call not too long after she dropped him off that he was unresponsive. And heartbreakingly, despite intensive treatment in the hospital, he did not survive. Now, Joshua was described as an exceptional athlete and a dedicated student, a young man with his whole future ahead of him, and his story really is a devastating reminder for us that heat stroke isn't something that only happens in extreme desert conditions. It can happen in your neighborhood, at your school, or even in your own driveway. And every time I see a story of tragic life loss at an early age, it's just especially painful to lose someone who had so much life ahead of them and to lose all of those possibilities and all of that life lived together. The family always says the same thing. They always say, I want his life to matter. I want their life to matter. I want to help other families. And so I want to honor his family today by equipping other families in honor of Joshua, how we can keep our kids safe. And I want you to hang in there with me because I'm going to get a little nursey on you. But at the same time, this is really important. I'm going to give you some perspective on why this has changed so much in new generations. So let's start with some basics on heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Now, heat exhaustion is when you're outside, you're hot, you have a headache, you're sweaty, you're tired, you're dizzy. That is telling you you are near heat exhaustion, which is a very serious thing. But heat stroke is when that heat exhaustion becomes a medical emergency. Your body temperature is really high. They may actually stop sweating, become confused, pass out. You're talking about electrolyte imbalance. And I have a cousin who very nearly died from this, miraculously survived. It is a scary, scary thing for sure. And some of those high-risk situations for families are going to be outdoor sports that are starting back out at this time, especially football, track, cheerleading, any band practice, anything that's outside during these summer months, or ROTC training. If you have playgrounds that are unshaded, even short walks in the direct sun without hydration, if you're for an extended period of time at a water park, at a zoo, anytime, if you're gardening, anytime you're out in the sun for more than 15 or 20 minutes and the temperatures are high, it really can be a dangerous situation. And we know that about 600 people die from heat-related illnesses in the United States each year. But here's the thing, children and teenagers dehydrate faster than adults do, and they often don't recognize the signs. As adults, we know when we're getting hot, when we're getting tired. Teens are often having so much fun, or kids are having so much fun, they're more likely just to try to push through, and they're more resilient, and they kind of, last a little bit longer before they have severe symptoms and a really rapid drop off, whereas adults tend to go down a little more gradually. Now, why has this been different? Because this is what I hear from listeners and from people all the time when we talk about hydration. Okay, I did not grow up with a Stanley tumbler. I drank out of the hose. I was just fine. And there is some truth to that. So I'm going to take a deep dive and answer some questions about that. But over the last few years, some high-profile water crises like the Flint, Michigan crisis, it's eroded trust in public tap water, especially in certain areas where things like that have happened. Breaches of integrity have happened in the water supply. So families become more cautious, and we are more aware of lead pipes or forever chemicals that are in outdated plumbing that is in schools or cities that are in our homes. And even if the actual risk is low, the perception of that danger is very high, and perception is what shapes behavior sometimes more than facts. And so parents, may tell their kids, hey, don't drink from the water faucet at school. We don't know if it's safe. And that may be true, but kids pass that message along. Even if their water is safe, it's just kind of becoming less favorable to drink from those public sources of water. Now, alongside of that, we have marketers who are always looking for ways to make money. That's economy. So we have bottled water, high-end water bottles. I mean, when you go in to buy a bottle of water, you can get alkaline water and all kinds of, you can get flavored water, you can get vitamin water, you can get any kind of water your heart can possibly imagine. This is marketing. This water's cleaner, this water's cooler, this water's premium, and this water's healthier. And kids now associate reusable bottles with status or hygiene or personalization, while definitely those water fountains and the garden hoses feel outdated or dirty. And we see the rise of the Stanley tumbler and other sorts of hydration bottles, which can be a social status symbol. So we've got really always this pendulum swinging between two extremes, and social pressure and Instagram culture. If I wouldn't post a picture drinking from it, I'm not drinking from it. And so there's something to be said. Now, even with the tumblers, you can accessorize them, you can personalize them, you can put charms on them. And all of this contributes. This is not just water bottle culture. That is anything where we're looking at personalized things for kids. Now, we also put in there germs and a pandemic era hygiene, where the COVID-19 pandemic amplified fears about shared surfaces. And it's always a good idea to not eat or drink after each other, especially in a school-based setting where you can share germs, but that has been amplified for sure. And then we've got peer pressure and social messaging, and kids are extremely tuned into what's normal in their peer group. And if no one else is drinking from the fountain, I'm not going to be drinking from the fountain. And we see these social incentives for BYOH. Bring your own hydration. That is how kids come to school. And that is, we need to reframe the narrative a little bit. If your water is safe to drink, then we can tell kids when and how, what water is safe to drink. And we know that most city water is highly regulated and safe to drink. So you can look at that. And if it's a choice between hydration and drinking the city water that you know to be safe, then and again, I can't dive into all of the questions on this. I know some of you already are thinking, no, it needs to be filtered and have a water softening system and all of that. We're just talking the basics here. But there are things that we can do to make sure that kids stay hydrated. Bottom line is we've got to find a balance. And kids may not still be drinking from the water fountain or the garden hose, or kids may be over invested in too many tumblers. But the bottom line is it's important to be hydrated when it's hot. So we've got to teach our kids how to make smart, safe, and unfiltered decisions. And the other contributors to hydration culture changing over time is that the balance of this is that our science has gotten better. In the past, dehydration was often under-recognized, especially in kids. But now we know that fluid balance affects how our brains work, how our emotions feel, our mood, our temperature regulation, and how we perform in sports, especially in hot weather. And research has shown that children are more susceptible to dehydration because their bodies just aren't cooling as efficiently, and they don't recognize their thirst cues until it's too late. So we used to say, drink as soon as you get thirsty. But really, the current guidance should be drink before you get thirsty. If you are already feeling thirsty, that means you're already starting to show dehydration, because thirst is a sign of dehydration. So we've got to pre-hydrate. The other thing is that youth sports are really more intense than they were when we were growing up. They're much more structured. Kids today are training year-round, and they're in sports camp. They're practicing multiple hours per day, August or not. And past generations, we had more unstructured, lower intensity outdoor play, and it just kind of allowed for more natural breaks in activity. But today's sports culture demands more intentional hydration strategies. When we come back, I'll be talking about when you should hydrate, how much you should hydrate, what you should hydrate with, all questions about sun safety coming up.
What does it mean to be a self-governing republic? And why is this form of government so important to Christians living in America? Hello, I'm Sam Rohr with another Stand in the Gap Minute. William Penn once wrote that Americans will be governed by the laws of your own making and live as a free and, if you will, serious and industrious people. Well, he was right. But he made it clear that those laws must be in alignment with God's moral laws to which people voluntarily submit. Penn and others said often that no republic could ever rise or continue unless the people and the leaders voluntarily submitted themselves to the 10 Commandments of God. They believed that integrity, a right relationship with God in heart and actions, was where it started. Virtue, they believed, the voluntary obedience to God's truth, is where it must go. Upon these things, a self-governing republic can survive. Discover more at AmericanPastorsNetwork.net.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you are a pastor's wife, come be encouraged and renewed as you share your challenges and stresses unique to pastors and their wives.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat is coming October 28th through the 30th. You're invited to join us at Pickwick Landing State Park in Counce, Tennessee for 3 days of encouragement, renewal, and worship. Once again, Brother Bert Harper, AFA Director of Family and Pastoral Ministries, will host the retreat along with his wife Jan. Our special speaker will be J.J. Jasper of American Family Radio. If you've attended in the past, we'd love to see you again. And if you've never experienced a fishbowl retreat, we especially invite you to be refreshed and renewed. The per-couple admission price includes lodging, meals, and materials. Visit repairingthefoundations.net to learn more and register. That's repairingthefoundations.net.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat. We'd love to see you there.
Oh, I love my job.
M.D. Perkins, documentary producer and director with American Family Studios.
Working on movies is a lot like building a house and writing a book at the same time. Research and detailed focus that you need with writing a book is there, but also the collaboration with other experts in the field. I've been with AFS since 2014, so this is my 10th year working for the ministry. The big project for me that really shaped a lot of the way that I think and approach all of our projects is The God Who Speaks. Can't get any more foundational at its core than that, so everything we do going forward is built on that foundation of God's Word. I think the purpose of AFS is to inspire, uplift, and encourage viewers with spiritually uplifting content that helps people think about the spiritual life.
Find M.D. Perkins documentaries and all the work of American Family Studios at stream.afa.net.
That can silence roaring waves. I know a name that can empty out a grave. I know a name. It's the only name that saves, and it's worthy of all praise. I call you Jesus. Something comes out of the grave. Every time I call you Jesus, I call you Savior, worthy of glory forever. Something comes out of the grave. Every time I call your name.
Welcome back, friends. That is I Know a Name by Brandon Lake, Chris Brown, and Elevation Worship. And I do know a name that I can call on in times of trouble, in times of joy. And I hope that you are thinking the same thing, and you're here on Friday. We are answering questions. God is the ultimate source of wisdom, and I'm here to give you what wisdom I have learned about sun safety. We're talking about 52 habits for healthy families, and today we are moving into our second week of talking about safety. Last week was tech safety. Today is sun safety, and I'm giving these tips in honor of 16-year-old Joshua Henderson, a high school football player from Tennessee who recently died from heat stroke, and we're so sorry to hear about that, and our prayers certainly go out to his family. And before the break, I was talking about how the culture has changed and why we're so focused on hydration. And I'll share with you during the break that my team, I guess, got a little worried when I said BYOH. I said H, bring your own hydration. That is this culture. If you were thinking anything else, I can't help you there. We're talking about bring your own hydration. Everyone goes everywhere with their own personal hydration, and hydration is good. But at the same time, things have changed because, as I was saying, youth sports are more intense. We also have, as I said, the rise of wellness culture and marketing. Water bottles have become status symbols. We've also have a hyper awareness among young people about how hydration even makes your skin look, how it makes your makeup applied, how it's a health strategy. And hydration is now viewed as a pillar of wellness, not just something to do in the heat. We've got, and if you don't believe that, just look at the consumer culture. You've got bottles with time marks on it saying to make sure that you're staying on track, or stickers or motivational quotes or planners or apps that help you track your hydration. And the good thing is that educational messaging has improved because schools and coaches and even healthcare providers are more proactive about hydration education. And many schools allow or encourage water bottles at their desk. This certainly wasn't the case in my generation growing up. And we talk about the things like electrolyte balance and hydration needs. Now, my husband is old school, and so he and I have conversations, and it's great because we balance each other. And there was one time I was at a conference in Denver, and he had all 4 kids at the Denver Zoo, and they were thirsty, but he was not about to pay $8 for a water bottle, for 4 water bottles, no less. So the kids were saying that they were really thirsty and that mom would want them to be hydrated. And he said, no one's ever died from dehydration. And they said, yes, actually, people literally die from dehydration. He said, well, not while they're out with their dad at the Denver Zoo. So, but I'm telling you, these things can cause some family discussions, can they not? And the key takeaway, though, is that hydration culture hasn't just changed just because kids are more sensitive. In some ways, we've become more informed. We have more extreme schedules and more demanding sports, and we're more committed to prevention. We know more about how hydration works, and what once seemed extra really is now essential. So as I said, it used to be drink as soon as you get thirsty. Now pre-hydration matters. This is something that really can be a life or death situation. Hydration's not just a game time decision. It is a pre-game strategy, because by the time a kid feels thirsty, or an adult, they may already be slightly dehydrated, especially true for younger kids and teens who ignore early signs like their mouth getting dry or a headache. Pre-hydration means making sure that your body is starting off with a healthy fluid balance before you start any physical activity, heat exposure, sweating. Because sweating is the way our bodies are made to regulate our body temperature. But we've got to replace that fluid loss before it happens, and during it happens, and after it happens. And heat, even light activity, we see little kids who are just sweating. You probably saw it on the 4th of July. They can actually lose 1 to 2 liters of fluid per hour through sweat. And for all of the parents out there doing the laundry, they say, yes, that is absolutely true. So if you know you're going to be outside for an event where it's going to be hot, start drinking water at least 24 hours before that, and encourage steady water intake throughout the day, and make sure that you're drinking drinks with electrolytes. And I'll talk about that. Now, before I do, I want to talk specifically about some caffeinated energy drinks, especially for teen athletes. Now, these are not recommended for teenagers, even though I know a lot of teens consume them, but caffeine is a diuretic, so it's going to contribute to fluid loss. It's going to make you lose fluid faster. So if teens are trying to caffeinate with energy drinks, which a lot of the ways that they're marketed make it seem like they're great for hydration, but they are not. The other thing is that many energy drinks also have very high levels of sugar. That slows water absorption, and it can make your stomach upset when you're out in the heat as well. But risks of energy drink, if they're going to dehydrate you faster, they increase your heart rate and your blood pressure, which can dehydrate you faster. It disrupts your sleep, which affects recovery, and it has potential for heat-related illnesses to escalate faster, especially in teens. And now some hydration drinks are really energy drinks, but you got to be really careful because the marketing is super confusing. And I'll give you an example of this. So my son went with my sister to a concert, and she bought him this can and passed him down this can. And he said in his mind, he looked at it and thought, oh my goodness, did my aunt just buy me alcohol? Which she didn't. It was a drink called Liquid Death, which is just water. It's just plain water. But the way that it's marketed looked confusing. And so drinks that that are just water but look like something else can be that way, or drinks that look like they're just a hydration drink can really be an energy drink or have lots of sugar and caffeine. So make sure that you are reading the label and that you know exactly what you're drinking, because again, that marketing can be really confusing. So let me give you some hydration do's and don'ts for your family. For hydration do's, start early. Start drinking water the day before you go outside. So this is fine to do. Just drink some water, maybe 8 to 16 ounces of water in the morning. You're going to drink a little, and that day of, drink some water before you start the activity, and then rehydrate with small, frequent amounts, about every 20 minutes during activity, about a half to 1 cup. Now, again, all of this, you should talk with your pediatric healthcare provider, especially for your student athletes, to get individualized recommendations for them. This is just a general guidance, but you should always consult with your own medical provider to make sure you're getting individualized recommendations. But plain water is the best first choice for most kids, and then use those electrolyte drinks wisely. Low sugar options are really helpful, or things that are like Pedialyte Sport. Only if you have prolonged outdoor exertion, if you're going to be outside for more than 60 minutes, you have high heat, heavy sweating, you're doing heavy exertion, you're doing, formal sports engagement, those can be really, really helpful. And then know the signs of dehydration. By the time you are showing signs of dehydration, you really need to stop and take a rest. It's not just to drink something to rehydrate, but take a rest and really have someone assess you and make sure that you're okay. Those can be dry lips or a dry mouth, dizziness, fatigue, muscle cramps. And train kids and teens to listen to their bodies and not to push through. That is something from culture, is just kind of suck it up and just go with it. But as we saw with the tragic circumstance of the news story that I opened with, that can be a very dangerous strategy. So really train kids and teens and coaches to listen to their bodies. And if you're feeling those symptoms of heat exhaustion, you really need to stop and take some time to recover. And if you're having those symptoms, being checked out by the athletic trainer or whatever medical support is provided by the team is really, really important. Or if you're not part of a team or a formal sports activity, call your healthcare provider. That can be really helpful. Hydration don'ts: don't wait until they say they're thirsty. Remember that thirst is a late indicator. So just taking small amounts at regular intervals is really good. Try not to allow any sugary sodas or juices, especially during outdoor play, because they just don't hydrate very well and they can cause blood sugar crashes. No energy drinks for kids. They're not safe hydration sources. And make sure that you're reading the label on anything that you're drinking. And don't overlook hydration on cooler days. Kids can still get dehydrated even if the temperature doesn't seem that hot. So energy drinks, again, may look cool, but in the heat, just a recipe for disaster. So it's really important. Just pre-hydrate, drink small amounts during activity, during outdoor exposure. And if you have any signs of dehydration or exposure, stop early and listen to that. That's really important. Not only are kids exposed to heat in sports activities or outdoor intensive activities during the heat, but hot cars can be deadly. We all have our hearts just sink when we see a story about a child being left in a car, and that just sends chills down every parent's spine. We don't want to see that. But a car can heat up very, very quickly. Even on a very mild day that's 70 to 75 degrees, the interior of that car can rise to 100 degrees in just 20 minutes. On a 90-degree day, you're talking about the inside of that car reaching over 120 degrees in just 10 minutes. Anybody who's sat on the car knows how fast it can heat up, and cracking the windows really does almost nothing to reduce that heat. But here's the thing. Kids' bodies heat up 3 to 5 times faster than adults. That's why they're so much at risk. And young kids can't regulate their temperature effectively or get themselves out of the car. Sometimes they're in a car seat, and brain and organ damage can occur within minutes of extreme heat exposure. That's heat stroke, that's hyperthermia. That occurs when your body temperature can no longer cool itself. And we know that there's an average of almost 40 kids every year who die in the United States from heat stroke after being left in a car. Over half of these kids were forgotten accidentally by a parent or a caregiver. And around a quarter of those gained access to an unlocked vehicle and then became trapped. So that's important too, not just leaving them in the car, making sure they can't go get in the car. And I remember this from my own childhood with one of my brothers being involved in both of these incidents, once being left accidentally in the car during church and someone walking by and seeing him. And that was a really scary experience. And another, getting access to the car and starting it and actually driving it across the street into my neighbor's yard. Thankfully, everyone was okay. But I've seen this personally and professionally. I know this can happen, but what we do know is that nearly all of these events are preventable. Now, why does it happen? Well, sometimes a change in routine. A parent who's not usually dropping off the child forgets, or you're distracted by a phone call, you're stressed, you have a lack of sleep, you've changed your schedule, and then out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes if a child is quiet or just sleeping in the back seat, you're just distracted and you forget, or you think, oh, I'll just be a minute, and you don't realize how fast heat rises. So really take a minute to think about what safety precautions you have in place to make sure that doesn't happen, and make sure that a kid is not left. And if you're ever a bystander and you see a child alone in a hot car, really assess the situation immediately. Is that child responsive? Are they sweating? Are they crying? Are they unconscious? Look at the time of day. But really, anytime you see a child unattended in a car by themselves, especially in a car seat, call 911 immediately. Give the dispatcher where you are, what the vehicle looks like, and the condition of the child. And if the child appears to be in distress, act. There are some states that have laws who protect bystanders who break into a car to rescue a child in danger. So check your state's Good Samaritan laws. But in most places, you are legally allowed to break a window to save a child if you've called 911, if you believe the child is in imminent danger, and if you stay at the scene until help arrives. Do your best to locate the driver. You can ask nearby businesses to make an announcement, or knock on windows or try doors. And many people accidentally leave their car doors unlocked, or alert the store security if you're in a commercial parking lot. But for parents and caregivers, create some reminders. Put your phone or your wallet or in the back, or your shoe even in the back seat. So when you get out, you only have one shoe. And I even cringe a little, to be honest, to say, put your phone back there, because we don't forget our phone and we can forget our kids. That is just a heavy conviction for all of us as a society. Or there's some apps or car seat devices that send alerts to make sure that you know that. Tell the daycare or the school to call if your child doesn't arrive on time, and lock your car when it's not in use, even if it's in your garage or in your driveway. Teach kids that cars are not play areas. Make sure they can't reach the keys, because as I said, a quarter of those hot car deaths happen when a child climbs into an unlocked vehicle and can't get out. So look before you lock should be every part of every family safety routine for car. Even on a cloudy day, don't risk it. Take a look and make sure you're looking to see if the kids are in there. When we come back, I am going to talk about summer talk. And I know some of you are thinking, what is that? What did she just say? I said summer talk. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm going to talk about trends of teen chasing the sun through some things like summer talk. We'll talk about the UV index and how popular that's become. We'll talk about tanning beds and sunscreen when we come back.
The mission of AFA is to inform, equip, and activate individuals and families to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and to give aid to the church here and abroad in its task in fulfilling the Great Commission. The vision of American Family Association is to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training in the interest of cultural transformation.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association as we seek to stop the erosion of godly values.
I'll do some stand-up comedy, Abe will do some preaching, and I'm really excited about it. The Weekend with AFA is a chance for our supporters to get better acquainted with the people and ministry you're supporting.
It's a Weekend with AFA, Thursday, October 2nd through Saturday, October 4th in Tupelo, Mississippi. Speakers will include Abraham Hamilton III, Jenna Ellis, Tim Barton, Tim Wildman, and more. Register at afa.net/weekend. That's afa.net/weekend.
Without even seeing them show up, I could feel like the darkness.
Jamie Sanchez is another Christian business proprietor who has been targeted for his faith. His Drip Cafe was opened to serve and help the homeless of downtown Denver.
We believe sex outside of marriage and homosexuality is a sin in God's eyes. And the enemy and his minions decided to use that as a platform.
Jesus told us persecution would come.
I would see them, just the rage and the hate. I pictured them doing that at the foot of the cross to Jesus. And I just remembered what he said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." And so I had to position my heart that way.
The Jamie Sanchez story is one of the videos of the Impact series at stream.afa.net.
It's been a crazy, crazy ride.
See Jamie's story and much more at stream.afa.net. In the darkest corners of the world, hunger, abuse, lack of clean water, and shelter are everyday realities. Tomorrow Clubs is a ministry motivated by the Great Commission to bring God's love and the hope of the gospel to these forsaken places. Here's an update from a team leader.
One of the greatest impacts Tomorrow Clubs have had is in raising a whole generation of Christ followers. More than 500,000 children have learned to follow Jesus in their Tomorrow Club, and tens of thousands have gone on to become leaders in their churches and communities. A great many of the leaders serving at Tomorrow Clubs today came to faith in a Tomorrow Club, and this new generation of Christ followers has brought revival to dying churches and transformation to communities.
Tomorrow Clubs provide Christ-centered discipleship for children and teens in underserved countries. To learn more about how you can partner with Tomorrow Clubs to reach the world for Christ, visit tomorrowclubs.org. That's tomorrowclubs.org. All gifts are tax deductible.
I got enemies at every side. It ain't looking good, I ain't gonna lie. Arrows flying, devils trying to make me think I'm going down this time. You might think that I'd be afraid, running scared with the shaking faith, but the God I know says it ain't over. The God I know is gonna make a way. Yeah, though I walk through the valley, I will have no fear, no fear. The mighty power of Jesus is fighting for me here. No fear, no fear. The light of the world makes the darkness disappear. No fear. No
Welcome back, friends. That is No Fear by John Reddick, and that's what we're talking about today. I'm answering your questions about the sun, and a lot of parents are afraid of the sun. But you know who's not afraid of the sun? Today's teenagers. They are chasing the sun. And I'm talking today, answering questions in 52 Habits for Healthy Families. We're in a safety series, and I'm talking today about how do we keep our families safe in the sun. And there's so many things that are changing. It's a refreshing change of pace a little bit from technology, but the sun is real. And did you know that just one blistering sunburn during childhood or adolescence more than doubles the risk of developing melanoma later in life? So I know if all of you are thinking about the way that you grew up and all the blistering sunburns and you're starting to get a little worried, well, that is a reality of sun exposure, because melanoma is the second most common cancer in teens and young adults, but it is preventable. So let's talk a little bit about this trend about teens chasing the sun on purpose and what I am seeing. Now, more and more teens are using their smartphone to check the UV index to time their outdoor exposure, not to minimize their exposure, but to maximize their exposure. And I'll talk a little bit more about this and a detail in this, but we also see teens who are skipping sunscreen on those high UV days to build a base tan. And they're tanning intentionally to look healthier for photos or vacations or social media aesthetics, or using tanning beds, especially before proms, before spring breaks, before school photos. And we're going to talk about this summer talk trend. Now, what's driving it? Well, that is social pressure and image culture. We look at that sun-kissed glow is still seen as attractive, as healthy, and it is desirable. We see Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. They have filters that you can do. And when you post this healthy sun-kissed look, you're going to get rewarded with a hit of dopamine to say, yeah, you look great. And some teens believe that tanning hides acne or that it improves their mood even. But we see UV index apps actually being misused. So UV index apps were created to help you know when the UV index is high and to avoid the sun. And teens are using them for the opposite purpose. Now, some of you may be saying, what is the UV index? Well, the ultraviolet UV index is a number that tells you how strong the sun's UV rays are at a particular time and place. And I've seen teens say, oh, UV is this number, let's go. And it helps you but it really helps you to know how quickly you could get a sunburn if you're outside. So think of it like a sunburn speedometer, kind of. So low 0 to 2, that's safe for most people. Minimal protection is needed. If the UV index is 3 to 5, that means use sunscreen, wear a hat, wear sunglasses if you're going to be outside for more than 15 minutes or so. High is 6 to 7. You can burn in as little as 20 minutes. You're going to make sure you stay in the shade, wear protective clothing, reapply sunscreen. And very high is 8 to 10. That's extra protection needed. Limit your time in the sun between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. when your shadow is short. And extreme is 11 plus. Take all of the sun safety precautions because your skin can burn in just a few minutes. I've seen this happen before when we were on a beach vacation with my family. I'm very conscientious, but my son in the sand with the reflection of the sun off of the sand and the water and the UV index being high, this was before I really knew anything about that and we had apps to track it. He burned really severely in just such a short period of time. I still have some mom guilt about it because he was so miserable. But most weather apps or websites show the UV index for the day. You can look at it in the morning before you go outside. And that is important for teens, for athletes, for people who are working outside. But even on cloudy days or when it's cool outside, the UV rays can still be high and they can still cause skin damage. So don't let the weather fool you. If that UV index is high, your skin can be at risk. So now we see, as I say, UV index apps used to intentionally seek out those peak exposure times. That would be midday when the UV radiation is at its highest between 10 and 4. Now, we also see this base tan, people wanting a base tan, and many believe that a base tan prevents sunburn, but that's actually not true. A tan offers the equivalent of basically SPF 3, which is not anything, and it causes DNA damage to your skin cells. Another trend that I see among teens is tanning beds. And there is a risk of melanoma. So let me give you some facts about teens and tanning bed use. About 7 to 9% of U.S. teens ages 14 to 17 report using tanning beds at least once a year. Now, girls are more likely to use tanning beds than boys, about 10% of girls, about 3% of boys, but we see this increasing. Again, in this marketing culture, we see companies who are marketing beauty products to girls who now they see there's this whole untapped market with boys. Like if girls are using moisturizer, why can't boys use moisturizer? And we see that just untapped market, and that's what drives a lot of influencers. And the highest rate of tanning beds are seen in teens age 16 to 18. Now, teen tanning bed is linked to an increased risk of melanoma, which, as I shared with you, is a common and deadly, particularly deadly form of skin cancer, especially if you're using a tanning bed before age 35. Now, we're starting to see this trend decrease a little bit, but at the same time, anytime with kids, it's all about a pendulum because we see tanning beds decreasing, but we see a flocking to the high UV rays increasing. So it always seems to balance like that. And there are actually a lot of states in the United States that have age restrictions or bans on tanning bed use for minors, but the enforcement and compliance vary. And so that's something to really think about. And really the recommendation is that teenagers should not be using tanning beds because, as I said at the top of this segment, a sunburn is skin damage that's caused by overexposure to those UV rays from the sun. And those UV rays penetrate through your skin and they harm the DNA in your skin cells. What does your body do? Well, it increases blood flow to that area. It's red, it's warm, it's swollen. That's the sunburn that you see and feel. And we know that 90% of visible skin aging is due to sun damage, not just genetics. And, when we look at the generational shift and attitude towards sun safety, we can all know how we grew up when we see those baby boomers or Gen X. Tanning was beauty. It was a leisure activity. I mean, come on. How many of you sat out on the beach with baby oil or foil reflectors or got into tanning beds? And millennials had some caution, but they still would tan, but they used SPF. They would use sunscreen, but it was a little inconsistent. And now we see Gen Z, the sun equals image currency. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that having that sun-kissed glow gives you a higher social affluence on social media. So we see UV tracking and we also see sun dumps and tan line trends. So you're probably thinking, what in the world is a sun dump? Well, we'll talk about it because your mom or maybe you tanned with baby oil, but today we're having other kinds of technology and really we're seeing this influencer culture contribute to images that we're posting online. So a sun dump is a trendy social media photo carousel. So especially on platforms like TikTok, like Instagram, teens are going to post sun-soaked photos from summer adventures like beach days, pool hangouts, lake trips, hikes, festivals, that kind of thing. And what we see is those posts, the algorithm prioritizing posts that show deep tans or sunburns with comments like worth it or burn now, tan later. That can even be hashtags. Or sweating is a sign of glowing, or posts that use minimal or no sun protection because the algorithm is going to respond to demand and photos that are most engaged with. And sun dumps are not going to show people putting on sunscreen or people in floppy hats. That's for old people, or shade breaks. And it just kind of reinforces that sun-drenched culture. And we also see even this in tan lines, showing off tan lines as your status symbol. So maybe that's your straps from your shirt, or we see cropped shirts or sock or sandal line tans, farmer tans. And sometimes those are posted ironically or unironically, or just to post the exaggeration to show your tan line. And again, the concern is that teens are intentionally seeking that strong UV exposure, and much as young people do, they think, oh, this won't impact me at all, but maybe, will be. But you think about it from a marketing perspective, it's really ingenious because they're creating now, the companies are creating now the consumers for their products, anti-aging products later. So this is all kind of housed under a broader trend called summer talk. That is a play on TikTok, summer talk, TOK. It's a broad kind of seasonal subculture on TikTok. And you'll see things like beach beauty tips or poolside skincare routines or sun care aesthetics or tan enhancing oils, DIY bronzing hacks that are often dangerous. And really, it can, again, nothing is new under the sun. I know that was a really cringy pun there, but it's true. Basically, we feel pressured to look a certain way, and we see spreads of misinformation like, hey, clouds block the UV, or natural oils are safer than sunscreen, which, there's all kinds of risk benefit there. And we need to help teens to make sure that they are always, our body is a temple, and we need to take care of it. God has given us our body and we need to take care of it. So helping teens know that tans mean your skin is damaged. There's no such thing as a safe base tan or a safe tan, and burns equal long-term risk. One blistering sunburn before age 20 doubles your risk of skin cancer, and UV damages aging. Now, kids, they don't think about that because their brains are not wired to think about that. But just encourage your teens to find sunscreens that feel good on their skin and maybe that are influencer approved and still safe. And you can talk to your primary healthcare provider about what sunscreen is going to be best for you. So let's teach our kids UV awareness as a health skill, making sure that, hey, we want to avoid those UV rays, and making sunscreen accessible, knowing that we're putting on sunscreen. That's just a normal part of our family culture. No tanning beds, and model those behaviors and educating our kids early. Talk about beauty standards that don't revolve around tanning and what we look like in the sun, and normalizing sun protection as a strength and not a weakness. Those things are really important, and we just can't forget ourselves as adults. So let me run through some basic sunscreen tips before we're finished here and our time is going out. For babies 0 to 6 months, the best protection is avoiding any direct sun exposure. Use the shade, get those cute little wide brim hats, and put lightweight long sleeves, and no sunscreen generally before 6 months. For toddlers and young kids, that's 6 months up to about 6 years old, you're going to put sunscreen on about 15 to 30 minutes before you go out, and reapply it at least every 2 hours or sooner after you're swimming or sweating. You're going to use about 1 ounce, that's a shot glass or a medicine cup full, to cover the entire body. Don't forget the ears, the tops of the feet, the back of the neck, and the scalp. Those things can burn really easily. And mineral or physical sunscreens are a little gentler on sensitive skin, and that can be really helpful. For older kids and preteens, show them how much and how often to apply. Start letting them do it themselves so that they make it that habit. Use an SPF between 30 and 50. A broad spectrum water resistant is generally good. I prefer the lotions for sure. The sprays are just not kind to your neighbors. They don't cover very well, and they're really, if you've ever been choking on somebody, spraying sunscreen all around you, it can be good for those little hard to reach spots. But for teens, talk about the long-term benefits. Really start talking about that and encourage them to use sunscreens. They will do that if, as adults, we lead by example. Broad spectrum SPF 30 plus for daily wear. That's really helpful. So I hope these have been helpful to you, and keeping your family in the safe in the sun. I know there can be a lot of challenges because we just want to get our kids outside, and getting outside is a great thing to do. We just need to be safe about it and be safe in the sun, and we can do that. So think about, what is your family sun safety routine? What is your culture like in your family about protecting yourselves from the sun? And I know that today's show had some hard moments, and this week has been a little tough, but it is necessary. It's not about fear. It's about wisdom and stewardship, loving our kids enough to protect them from what they can't yet see. So I pray wherever you are under the sun, that the Lord will bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you. We got a great show for you next week, a lineup of shows, and we'll talk more next Friday about more safety. See you then.